Hello and welcome to my Unit 2, and I'm pretty much going to divide this into two different sections to make it easier. The first section is going to be talking about queries now and building of a certain query. Now many of you will recognize this for the class table and the instruction table from the last time that we worked on this. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create a query, and we're going to basically my query is not going to do a whole lot, but it is going to, it's not going to have a whole lot of, the purpose would be malleable, I guess is the easiest way to go about doing it. So what's going to happen is I'm going to click on create, and then I'm going to do a query design. Now, they make you go through, and I believe they make you use the query wizard. Either way it works. So you'll notice that you've got your field, your table, your sort, your different criteria down here, and then your different tables that you can work with. If you happen to lose this particular window, you can always click your Show Table button, which is under Design. Now your Show Table button, when it comes up, is all the different tables that you have included. Now I'm only going to include one particular table, and it's going to be the class table. So I'm going to go ahead and push Add. So here's I've added my class table. That's it. I'm going to add things later on. And then what you do is you kind of pick and choose information, and this acts as an information filter from your table. So I can't have a query based, technically you can, but for our purposes, we're just dealing solely with this little query right here. I'm going to go ahead and close I'm going to make this a little smaller for your property sheet. So if I want to do, let's say, class number, I can come up, I can left click and hold in class number, and I can drag it and drop it right there. That's one way. I can also click right here, and I can choose class number, right? And I can click right here, and I can double click on room number, and then I can put on instructor number. And the way this is going to work is when I run it, all it is a flow through, and it shows you the information that you want to work with. So at the very top, class number, room number, instructor number, I must add this twice. Usually it does this if there's some sort of match between titles. Yep, I added class number twice. Interesting thing about this is I can actually go into and call this a title sample, right? Put a colon there, and now when I run it, it's going to say title sample as opposed to whatever it is. So that's kind of neat. What I can also do is I can also put in some sort of criteria in our query. So let's say, for instance, I wanted to pull up all the my instructor number 1, whoever that happens to be. I wanted to pull up everything related to that particular person. So down here under criteria, I could put 1, right? This is just simple. And it only pulls up the items that I put in for 1. Now, if you come in and you put in criteria that you don't know, or it doesn't know, for instance, I'm going to put in my square brackets, I'm going to put in enter instructor number, and then I can put in square bracket. What it tries to do is it tries to find something that is related to instructor number, and then as I run it, it says enter instructor number 1, boop, and it actually pulls that up. The neat thing about that is, as I was saying, the neat thing about that is I can rerun the query and put in a for an instructor number. So I enter instructor number 2. It comes up with all the information related to instructor number 2. And then if I do it again, instructor number 4. And there's an instructor as it relates to 4. Now, the neat thing or the thought process behind this when you're putting together queries are, you could put in a specific query that you were looking for right here, so you can put in specific instructor numbers. But the good thing about making it malleable like that is now I have a query that is for any instructor data that I wish, or any instructor number that I wish. So if I look at my instructor data and my my instructor number goes up, so later on I add a 3 or add a 4 or anything along the lines, this query will now have the ability, by putting in square, curly brackets isn't actually square, enter instructor number. Now this has the ability to be changed for every particular instructor. So I could call this if I wanted to, because I'm going to file, save as, so I'm going to change the name on this bad boy. I believe I can rename. Oh, we're going to close this. And it's going to ask you, do you want to save design and query? Yes. And I'm going to call it instructor num query, right? So I know how it pulls. And then if I look right here, there's instructor num query. Now, if I want to go back to that bad boy, well, let's say I want to duplicate that. So I'm going to right click and I'm going to put copy, and then I can paste. And I'm going to call this instructor class join. And the reason I'm going to call that particular way is I'm going to change what it is. So if I want to open that up again, I could right click on it, go to my design view, right? So it's going to pull it up. And I have one particular class. Now if I want to add a second class, if I want to add a second table, I go into my instructor data and I'm going to push add. So there's my instructor data. Now, your instructor data, as we've talked about before, has a one-to-many relationship. So it's automatically put right there. The neat thing about this is, let's say for instance, I have the instructor number and I want to pull a query based off instructor number, but I don't want to show the instructor number. So I can still include the instructor number here. Oh, well, stop yourself. Forgot I had it open. I can still include the instructor number here, right? It won't display, and then I can put the first name and I can put the last name. So now when I run this, I'm going to put instructor number 1, and it's going to have the first name and the last name in it, but it's not going to display the instructor number because of the fact it wasn't there. But notice it's using the one-to-many join to pull the information out of the instructor data. And when I talked about this last week, I was talking about actually creating this information in such a way where if the name changes, such as someone's married or something along those lines, you can just go to instructor data and change it. So for instance, if I run this, I put instructor number 1, you have my name, which is Sebastian. Let's say I get a weird hair later on, and I want to change my name. So if I get to the instructor data, and instead of Czar, I'm going to call myself Bob, because that's going to happen. And I call myself Bob, because I just had a bad day, I guess. So now what's going to happen is if I run this right here, if I run this particular, if I run this particular query, and I put instructor number 1 in there, now what's going to happen is it's going to say Bob Sebastian. Now, the benefit of that is, you notice I only had one change, and it pulls across each instance of me teaching that particular class and changes the name. Now, if you multiply that by 20, you'd multiply it by 30, you increase the number of classes that you teach, and suddenly it makes perfect sense that you have the Bob part in there as opposed to not. And if I want to go back to the design view of that, I can right click, I can do the design view, and I'm right back here. I can also do things like if I wanted to, rather than have the first name and last name like that, I could do things like, let's see if I can actually do this. Full name, right? And I could put in first name, right? Because it's going to look in a query for first name, and space, right? And last name. Okay? So I'm going to turn these two off, and I'm going to turn that one on fully. There we go. And so now when I actually run this, it should put the two names together. So instructor number 1, there we go, Bob Sebastian. So now it has a full name, but you're still able to use it to alphabetize and do things along those lines. So that takes us through some very, very basic query things, and there's a lot more to them, but that kind of gives you some ins and outs of a single number query as well as a class where you're joining two tables together. Thank you very much for your time. So far, so good.